Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Tip of the Ice-Burgh podcast, your home for Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We got a good show for you guys today. A busy weekend for the Pittsburgh Penguins, 2 losses, but at the same time, plenty of storylines that are much bigger than missing out on 2 points over the weekend that we'll get into. First and foremost, Michael Bunting got a wake-up call in Winnipeg. He was benched. How bad has he been? How important is it that he bounces back when he gets back in the lineup? We presumably assume that it's going to be later this evening against the Calgary Flames. Then a discussion about a handful of Hall of Fame defenders as we look back on this week in Penguins history. And then we'll close things out with our thoughts on the Penguins' 3-goalie system. Let's get started. And let's kick things off with that wake-up call for Michael Bunting, because when we were previewing this season, we said we're so excited. And everybody said this. It wasn't just us, but we said we're so excited to see what Michael Bunting looks like for a full season next Malkin. Well, it hasn't really been sunshine and rainbows to this point. It hasn't been the best start out of Michael Bunting, and it resulted in a healthy scratch on Sunday, which means he officially is taken out of the running for the Iron Penguin Award. We're down to, I believe, 14 players 2 weeks into the season, and none of it is due to injury. So take that for what you will. I mean, that goes into what Mike Sullivan's thought processes are, I guess. But when you look at Bunting specifically last year, he was acquired at the trade deadline in the trade for Jake Gensel, scored 19 points in 21 games. 6 of those 19 points were goals. But then you look at what he's done this year. 1 assist in 6 games, 73% offensive zone starts. So they are deploying him as if he is an offensive weapon, and yet they've still been outshot 43-37, and they've also given up as many goals as they've scored at 5-5 when he is on the ice at 5-on-5. When asked about the decision to sit down Michael Bunting, Mike Sullivan just simply said, quote, "I think our expectation is higher." So I'll ask you this, Horwat. Were you surprised at all that it got to this point with Bunting? Because we talked about him on Thursday in that word association segment that we did, and both of us said kind of quiet, kind of meh, kind of needs to step up a little bit more. Well, Mike Sullivan agreed and sat him down on Sunday against an undefeated Winnipeg Jets team.
Yeah, I wasn't surprised, but at the same time I was. I think it's going to go hand in hand in way of saying he's getting paid a lot of money to sit out. It's not normally what the Penguins do. However, he's been bad. There has not been any redeeming qualities of his play so far this season, obviously demanding such a punishment. So if Mike Sullivan's going to have short leash with guys, by all means, this tactic should be used pretty often. Like Josh Yowie said in his article with The Athletic yesterday, Sullivan's patience is gone, and I don't blame him at this point, because not only do the Penguins need to start winning, Sullivan probably knows this now his job is finally on the line. Now it is finally on the line because that contract has started. They've missed the playoffs 2 straight years. I'm sure there's a hunger from ownership at this point. I'm sure they don't care about that connection anymore, because Fenway didn't get here. They didn't buy the Penguins to watch a losing team, to own a losing team. I know they do it plenty with the Sox, but that's not why they got into hockey. And that's why they brought in Dubas, because they believe he can bring a winner. I mean, yeah, they're the ones that extended Sullivan, but it's going to be his job on the line now. And Mike Sullivan's going to start pulling guys quickly. We already saw it with Jarry. We're now seeing it with Bunting. If Yoey's correct, Graves might be next. Can't blame him there. And then we'll see how it goes from there. Like, utilizing the healthy scratch for wake-up calls. If it works with Bunting, if it works with Jarry, then things should even out. But I was surprised, and by way of just scratching the big pagan guys isn't usually what they do. Mm-hmm. But if it's going to be a common thing this year, it should be a wake-up call to everyone, honestly, too. And maybe Bunting was just the the guinea pig for the experiment.
Yeah, I'm sure a lot goes into a decision to scratch a guy like a Michael Bunting, or even though he said it wasn't a healthy scratch yesterday at practice, scratch a guy like Tristan Jarry as well. We'll get to that when we talk goalies in the third segment. But I think part of that discussion and part of that decision is what happened last year. I mean, they wrote it out early in the season with Rickard Rakell, who went 17 straight games without a goal. They wrote it out for a long time with Riley Smith in the top six, hoping that, hey, these guys have talent. These guys have done it in the past. Eventually, they're gonna turn it around. Eventually, they're gonna find their rhythm. They're gonna find their game, and it just never worked out for those two players. And how many missed opportunities, how many goals were missed, how many games were lost because you just kept smashing your head against a brick wall with these two players. This year, it seems like Sullivan's saying, listen, I am not doing that same thing. I am not just going to wait for you to figure it out. I'm going to try to push buttons to get this thing to work. And for Michael Bunting, that happened to be a healthy scratch. Now, he was bad, like I mentioned, outshot 43-37 when starting 3/4 of your shifts in the offensive zone is not good. And you could just tell eye test wise, he just wasn't playing the same way he was playing late last season, in which endeared him to the fan base and to Mike Sullivan as well. How impactful is it if Bunting doesn't bounce back, if he continues to perform at his current pace?
Oh, that would be huge. I mean, because of the way he came in as one of the best trade pieces in the league after the deadline last year. I believe he was second in scoring to Gensel. Yeah. So that ended up being the trade of the year essentially. But the way that, if you want to argue that shouldn't be the expectation for him, fine. I think I can understand that. The expectation is definitely higher though. The expectation is definitely more than an assist in 6 games, an even plus minus 8 hits. I was trying to see if he was still the guy that throws the body around. I mean, for the most part, he kind of is, but 8 hits seems like it's on the low end for someone who is the thorn in the opponent's side like him. I feel like that should be a higher number, and it's just not working out at the moment, and all it needs to be is a wake-up call, hopefully.
Yeah, it feels like he's a step slow on a lot of these plays. I mean, you talk about what you want from Michael Bunting. A lot of that is forechecking. And he hasn't really been in the right place at the right time. He hasn't been making the plays on the forechecking. Whereas you look at guys like O'Connor, you look at guys like Jesse Puljujärvi, you look at a guy like, Brian Rust. Those guys are all in on the forecheck and kind of causing havoc in the opposing team's defensive side of the ice. That's what you expected from Michael Bunting, and I just think that that's what you haven't gotten. But if he continues to perform the way he has, it's detrimental to the Penguins' chances of really doing anything this year. They don't have a bona fide 40 goal scorer anymore. They just don't. They never replaced Jake Gensel 1-for-1. So what they need is everybody to step a level above what they're expected to kind of buoy the top 6. Here's the thing, though. The bottom 6 is doing that. The bottom 6 is providing more scoring. No, nobody is replacing Gensel, but they are helping to fill the gaps. You need Michael Bunting to be able to do that in the top 6 as well, because you look at the production from the top 6, it has been Crosby, Malkin, and that's about it. I mean, Rakell has 3 goals. He's been able to finish. Brian Rust is one of the players that has had the most opportunities and the least finishes early in this season. And Michael Bunting, who we're talking about, has not been able to get on the scoreboard. I believe that assist is even a secondary assist. So if his production does not ramp up, then it doesn't buoy the top 6. It doesn't help fill the gaps that Gensel leaving creates. And the Penguins are screwed at that point, because he did it last year. And that's why the Penguins were so successful down the stretch. 19 points in 21 games. You're right. That shouldn't be the expectation for Michael Bunting, but it is much higher than one assist in 6 games. They need the Michael Bunting of last year again to help kind of elevate the top 6 to a level that is decent. Whereas right now it is not decent. It is being carried solely by the Stars, and then also I will say by Rickard Rakell as well.
Can I hit the mute button? There we go. And I would even argue that Crosby's not having the greatest start. I get he's got 6 points in 7 games.
In 1 game.
Yeah, and I believe of the 7 games, he's gone without a point in 4 of them. I just looked into it. It's it hasn't been over the top, and it hasn't been that he's taking games over. Now, he's not the guy you're going to scratch for the sake of a wake-up call.
Well, no.
He'll figure it out himself. He'll even it out. Don't worry. But at the moment, especially while Michael Bunting is kind of floundering to start the year, you're going to need the other guys to step up. Sidney Crosby needs to be one of them. He's known that. He's known that Sidney Crosby is going to need to be the one to step up from the start. Evgeny Malkin's done a good job of setting the pace for the start of the year. Now it is just time for everyone to follow suit. Sidney Crosby will find his game eventually. It's just a matter of how quickly can he do it. We got to remember he had 22 points in the first 16 games last season.
Yeah.
I think that was the expectation for him to come in on that 100-point pace, to come in and deeper into the season, be part of the MVP conversation. So far, none of that from him. None. And just coming in, the expectation from Rickard Rakell wasn't much, and he's exceeding that. That's a good sign. The expectation from Michael Bunting here was more than what we're getting. So it's going to take time to even it out, but hopefully just one healthy scratch was a good enough wake-up call, not only for Bunting, and I think this is where everyone needs to look. Hopefully it was a good enough wake-up call for anyone else who is feeling that threat, feeling that heat. I think Ryan Graves comes to mind, maybe another couple of forwards, just depending on who.
Yeah, a lot of lineup shuffling from Mike Sullivan, kind of creating that feel of, hey, if you don't produce, you're done. Like, you're going to sit. And whether that's sit or whether that gets sent down, that hasn't happened yet outside of Rutger McGroarty. But I think you're going to start seeing that as well as we get into the second month of the season, where if you're not performing, you could get placed on waivers if there's somebody in the AHL that is performing and deserves an opportunity. Hint, hint, wink, wink, wink. Sam Poulin has been putting up a lot of points at the AHL level. Is it time to, have another 3 games so he can get up to 9, maybe even get him to double digits? Maybe in a little bit. Maybe we're putting cart before the horse, but that is the name to watch right now after the first 2 weeks of the American Hockey League season. So Sullivan's been moving things around. So we'll see if that continues tonight against the Calgary Flames. Let's go over and talk about this week in Pittsburgh Penguins history, which, as we typically do with these segments, is going to help kind of transition us into something that's happening in present day and into a discussion about what's happening in present day. But October 26th in 1991, Paul Coffey passes Dennis Potvin to become the NHL all-time leading scorer among defensemen. Now, that doesn't still hold today because there's a man named Ray Bourque who went up and surpassed Paul Coffey, but Coffey still sits in second all-time in defensive scoring with 1,531 points. You look at the 2 Hall of Famers on today's roster. Erik Karlsson is 17th on that list with 822 points, and Kris Letang is 23rd on that list with 745. So Hall of Famers, we all agree. Neither of them have been good this season. I mean, to put it pretty plainly, they've both been bad this season. The offense is fine. Letang has 3 points in 7 games, 2 of those 3 points being goals. Karlsson has 5 points in 7 games, a goal and 4 assists, but it's not been enough to outweigh how bad they've been defensively. We never expected them to be the best shutdown defenseman the NHL has ever seen, but it's gotten to a new level of bad this season, and it's tearing down the entire unit because it's not just them. The entire team defensively has been very bad. Is there a point, though, with these two that you become okay with the defense being crappy because the offensive production becomes so overwhelming? And what is that point, if so?
I don't think there is, just because you need to have tighter defense. Your goaltending's not bailing you out this year.
Yeah.
So it's not a matter of any of that. With the goaltending looking the way it is, and something we'll discuss in a few minutes, you just need to have tighter defense. I don't care how much the team is scoring. I don't care if the bottom 6 is ramping up its offense the way it should be. I don't care if Sidney Crosby finds his rhythm. I don't care if Evgeny Malkin is continuing this pace. Your defense needs to be defense, needs to play defense.
Mm-hmm.
I've said it a gazillion times. It's literally the name of the position.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do that. Kris Letang's got a couple of goals. That's all well and good, and he can keep that up too. It's just a matter of leading by example defensively. I mean, those are the 2 that this entire defensive core will look to as the leaders. And I'm sure everyone will understand that these guys aren't going to be world beaters defensively. They're not. They're not going to be your shutdown pairing. They're not going to be the Kris Letang kills penalties, but they're not going to be those stout defensive names that are out there for the sole purpose of shutting down. No, they're out there to create offense. Heck, they get paired together whenever it's time to really find some offense. And the rest of the defense will understand that, but they still need to lead by example and at least look like they're doing good defensively. Like they're holding their own defensively. And when those two are faltering, we're still waiting for more from Ryan Graves. We're still waiting to see if Matt Grzelcyk can do anything of substance. And who's left? Who am I missing? Marcus Pettersson has not looked the same this year.
No, he is
That's
not.
fun. And then Ryan Shea, Jack St. Ivany. Really of those two NHLers at this point, it's getting to that question. It's getting to that point. All 6 blue liners have not looked, I don't want to say not looked serviceable, but haven't looked great to start the season. And it doesn't play hand in hand totally, but there is a little bit of a Venn diagram between good defense and good goaltending. And right now the Penguins aren't getting either, but if the defense can step up, then maybe the goaltending can follow suit a little bit because they're facing fewer high danger chances.
Yeah, you look at the whole team. Most goals allowed in the NHL so far with 31. 31 goals in 7 games is ridiculous. Worst goals against per 60 minutes, which is 4.27. So even though the offense has been much better this year, the bottom 6 is scoring, like you mentioned, the defense is pitching in when they can, which is great. You need to score at least 5 goals a game just to win. You need to score at least 4 goals a game just to be in the game. That is far from sustainable, especially for a team that right now, has a good power play. Does that go out the window? And when it does, what are you left with, right? What are you left with at that point? So when you look at the defensive performance here, I think that, there is a point where if they're scoring so much offensively, then you look past it for those 2 players. But they're not at that point, and they're not anywhere near that point. It is over a point per game that you need to be scoring if you're Karlsson and Letang. And you know what else has to happen? Pettersson has to be great defensively. Grzelcyk has to be great defensively. Your third pairing needs to look like it did late last season when Shea and St. Ivany were making all of us question whether or not they would be the third pairing of the future. That hasn't happened, and neither has the Penguins' offense been amazing from both Karlsson and Letang. So they do, as you mentioned, need to spearhead this effort to say, hey, we need to be better defensively. They're the leaders of this group. And you can say what you want about Erik Karlsson. You mentioned it. He is never going to be a stout defensive defenseman. He's made some nice plays at times. He just needs to do that more often and maybe take a little bit less risk. I understand you're kind of handcuffing him at the same time. When you do that, you're not really getting Erik Karlsson out of Erik Karlsson. But right now, you are getting good production out of Kevin Hayes. You're getting great production out of Lars Eller. For a little while, can we settle things down on the back end just to ensure that the Penguins can find their footing defensively? Because the worst goals allowed per 60 minutes in the NHL is not a team that typically finds their way into the playoffs. And when you look at that stat and you break it down defenseman by defenseman, it's not the bottom pairing. It's not the bottom pairing. When you look at the worst expected goals against per 60 minutes at 5-on-5, individual players, there are 75 players that kind of qualify, which means they played 90-plus minutes. 70th is Matt Grzelcyk. 73rd, 74th, and 75th. Of 75 are Letang, Karlsson, and Pettersson. That is your top 4. Boy. That is far from good enough.
Oh, that made my head hurt.
Yeah. A lot of numbers, I know, but let's just put it this way. As far as playing defense, Penguins have 4 of the worst 6 in the NHL right now. And it's their top 4. It's not Ryan Graves. It's not Ryan Graves. It's not Jack St. Ivany. It's not Ryan Shea. It is the 4 guys that you're paying the most money to be your defenseman.
It's not Ryan Graves. And for what it's worth, Ryan Graves has played over 90 minutes. He got 104. So he's on that list somewhere.
Yes.
That's a step in the right direction. You don't need to find it if you don't want to. But it's getting so bad. It's getting so bad out there for that. Because say what you want about a new defensive coach. It's the same system, brother. It's the same thing, pretty much. Tell tell Erik Karlsson to mitigate the risks that he's taking. It'll be fine in the long term because, again, the scoring will come to Erik Karlsson. There's no doubt about that. The power play is looking decent, and he's a big part of it. Whereas if you mitigate the risk a little bit on 5-on-5 for him, the offense will follow. The offense will find him eventually. At this point, while the offense finds everybody because the scoring has not been good for the Penguins, play defense, play your position, play the namesake of your position. And when this experiment, because you also have to figure the Penguins are still in an experimental period. Look at them healthy scratching Bunting. A bunch of guys are in the minors. Look at them, regardless of what Mike Sullivan wants to call it, healthy scratching Tristan Jarry.
Yeah.
There's clearly still some experiments happening here. One of them should be Erik Karlsson playing a more conservative style of defense and then let the offense roll after that. Because we said last episode how bad the defense has been. Mm-hmm. And I said then by the next time we talk, it should be a little bit more squared away. We're talking again and it's not. So this is bad.
Yeah. By the way, Ryan Graves is number 20 on that list.
If all right, here's the fun part, because if you would have said Ryan Graves is 20 on that list last year, well, man, the Penguins defense is kicking butt and taking names in that case.
Well, here's the thing. It's also per 60 minutes, and Ryan Graves doesn't play. Well, never mind. You know what? Because I put out a stat today on Twitter that says he has the third highest percentage of, I believe it's 5-on-5 ice time. So I don't know. I mean, he was not good on Sunday. Sunday was probably his worst game. But he hadn't been horrible leading up to that point, which is probably why he's here, whereas the rest of the defense has been god-awful. And I know expectations are a little bit different when it comes to what you expect from Grzelcyk, what you expect from Letang, what you expect from Karlsson and Pettersson versus what you're expecting from Ryan Graves coming off the worst season of his professional life. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, that top four needs to be much better, because if Ryan Graves is that far ahead of you in any category, you know you're not in a good situation defensively.
No, yeah, that's what I said. Like if you were to say that all five defensemen or all the other five defensemen that are normally in the lineup are ahead of him in this situation, like I said, well, all right, that means the Penguins defense is rocking and rolling. Whereas he's standing at 20 and everyone else is 50 players behind him.
Yeah.
Have fun with that.
Yeah. So, I mean, the Penguins, we talked about the defense a lot on Thursday, which is why this is the second segment and not the first segment, because the defense is the worst part of the Penguins right now. The goaltending is the most interesting, but let's face it. Nedeljkovic, for large stretches of that game on Sunday, looked pretty good, and it was his season debut. Mm-hmm. Lundqvist, for most of his stint so far, has been pretty good. It's the defense that is the most detrimental piece to this entire puzzle right now. I know that the Penguins need better goaltending. They do, but two things can be true at the same time, and one thing can be more true. And the one thing that's more true is the Penguins are bad defensively. So that is going to continue to be a major topic of conversation. But the other one is goaltending, and we're going to get to that right now. Let's go to our weekly Pens poll. This week we asked, do you believe the three-goalie system is a sustainable solution for the Penguins this season? 79% of voters said no, this is not sustainable. This is not something that you can rock with for a long, extended period of time. 21% said, yeah, just keep doing that. And I want to ask that 21%, how much of you voting yes was just because that means Tristan Jarry is a healthy scratch versus, yeah, this is actually a sustainable way to run a hockey team. So 79% say no, 21% say yes. Horwat, what camp do you fall in?
It doesn't feel sustainable. It's never something the Penguins have done, and they don't have the lineup that can warrant this sort of situation. Like, some teams have been able to do it in the past. The Hurricanes come to mind. The Geyser plan in Detroit attempted it, and it's not working. They put Husso on waivers the other after one game.
Yeah,
it's not something the Penguins have ever rolled with, have ever looked even slightly considered to doing. Mm-hmm. So I don't get the vibe that that's what should be going on here. I mean, you got Jarry and Nedeljkovic to be your 1 and 2 guys. That's what they went into last season with. Blomqvist was coming up as the budding prospect. After last season, it seemed a little iffy. It seemed like it could be Nedeljkovic, Blomqvist, depending on how the offseason went. Could be Jarry Jarry Nedeljkovic again. Could be Jarry Blomqvist because Nedeljkovic's contract was up, and honestly, I think we all assumed he was gone.
Yeah.
But the Penguins re-signed him. They kept him and made things. From that moment, that's when things got interesting. All right, well, now you have 3 possibly NHL level goalies that can, be in the lineup every night. One of them's going to have to go to the AHL, and Blomqvist gets the short end of the stick there. However, he has played the most minutes. He has looked the best so far. Yeah. Okay, Nedeljkovic just had 1 game, but you get what I'm saying.
Yeah.
So it's a matter of figuring out who your 2 were going to be. Through hook or by crook, or by waivers, by trade, by way of whatever means Cal Dubas decides to come up with.
Yeah.
Something will have to get figured out I'm not going to name names. I'm not going to say who the 2 should be, but he'll have to figure out which 2 it's going to be.
You're not going to say which 2 it should be?
No, because I don't know why. I still feel like
that's what we're here for. I mean, first and foremost, when it comes to judging the performances so far, I'll revert to Billy Beane and Moneyball. You got Blomqvist, you got Nedeljkovic, you got 50 feet of crap, and then you have Tristan Jarry. That's where we're at right now. So if you're Kyle Dubas, I understand there is no perfect solution, because the easiest thing to do business-wise is send down the guy that is waivers exempt, which is Joel Blomqvist, let him get some playing time in the AHL, and try to clear some space for him to get more NHL opportunities. It stinks because the kid deserves more opportunities at the NHL level. He deserves to stay at the NHL level. But business-wise, that's just the thing that is the easiest, is the thing that makes the most sense. But there are other options. Right? I mean, obviously one of them is trade, but that one is far out of the realm of possibility at the moment, unless a team gets extremely desperate extremely quickly. You look at what Elliot Friedman had to say yesterday at Sportsnet. Quote, "I wondered if they were going to put him on waivers on the weekend. They obviously didn't. They've looked to see what the market is. It's tough right now because he struggled." That is the nicest way of putting it possible. The guy has been pulled in 4 of his last 10 starts. He has a sub 880 save percentage in his last 14 starts or something like that. Bob Grove has all the stats, so go check it out on Twitter. But he has no trade value right now. Why would anybody trade for him? So it's an option, but it's also out of the realm of possibility. The only other option they have with Tristan Jarry is to, 1, run this 3 goaltender system, which for the time being, sure, it is a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. It's holding, but not very much. 2 is waivers. And it's not a great situation. It's not a great solution, but there are no great solutions when your $5 million goaltender is playing like an ECHL talent.
Mm-hmm.
You put him on waivers, other teams would have 24 hours to claim him, as they do with anybody that's on waivers. But if he gets through, which I would assume he gets through, and the Penguins assign him to the AHL, they do have to deal with a buried cap hit of $4.225 million that stays on their NHL books while they get $1.15 million in relief and Jarry gets off their roster. That's the biggest thing at that point that you're trying to do, is allow him to play games at the AHL level so it's not hurting you at the NHL level, and you get a little over $1 million in cap relief, which is essentially nothing at this point.
Yeah, if you wanted to start looking at teams that might want to take a flyer, because it really is taking a flyer on Tristan Jarry. If Kyle Dubas have to do some real convincing that he just needs a change of scenery, which is entirely possible. The pressure has been on him since Matt Murray left. And if Kyle Dubas is able to convince someone that it just needs to be a change of scenery, Colorado, Utah come to mind right away. I mean, Utah is winning, but not by way of their goaltending. Connor Ingram has been okay. He's playing a great Grant Fuhr this year of, I'm going to make sure they score 1 less goal than we do.
Yes.
And that's fine, but that won't sustain. Maybe Tristan Jarry goes there. Very much a new situation in Utah. Feels very fresh to everybody. Maybe there's a little bit more of a loose play there. He can just kind of play his game, find something. Colorado, I mean, yeah, the expectations are far higher, but boy, oh boy, they need a goalie. I know they just rifled off 2 straight wins, but they need anybody. Alexander Georgiev has given up 20 goals in 5 games. If Jarry could go in there again, just and based purely on change of scenery, that's decent. That'd be the only thing that would possibly get him that chance. And that's decent enough. That's solid enough. I had another team in mind. I just can't remember who it was now, but Edmonton, which again, that could be a much better change of scenery for someone like Tristan Jarry, closer to home. It's where he won a Memorial Cup. It's where he won a Memorial Cup in junior. So it's maybe there's something to be had with that one. But again, I'm spitballing. I'm throwing names, teams out there.
Yeah.
None of that is certain. None of that is guaranteed. And that would be nothing but clearing cap space for the Penguins. Who knows what a trade in return would look like?
Yeah, and here's the thing. Right now, none of that's on the table.
Nope.
Like, none of that's on the table. The Penguins reportedly tried to trade him in the offseason. No one called back. Apparently, they have him, dangling out there right now. I would imagine nobody is calling back. Like Friedman said, it's tough right now because he has struggled. He has struggled a lot, Friedman.
Yeah.
You're 100% correct. So the options right now are three-goalie system, which is where they're at. I don't believe that's sustainable. You have to make a decision at some point. And honestly, your decision, it might be Blomqvist. That's what stinks. I don't think that you see Nedeljkovic going anywhere. I think he's probably sticking where he's at. And then your options for Jarry are stick with this three-goalie system, trade him, which is, again, he has to have some trade value, which he doesn't right now, or put him on waivers, in which he goes on waivers. Maybe somebody takes him because they don't have to give anything back, but it's not like the Penguins would be asking for anything anyway. And if he gets through waivers and you send him down, you get that extra $1.15 million in cap space. And more importantly, you get the roster spot available at the NHL level. So you're not just running with one extra forward, one extra defenseman the entire time, which I think is another part as to why this three-goalie system is not sustainable. You're going to need options, and having one extra forward, one extra defenseman is not something that I think Mike Sullivan wants. But again, who knows what Mike Sullivan wants, because he doesn't even want to say that he benched Tristan Jarry. He doesn't even want to say that he scratched Tristan Jarry. He doesn't look at that way. He looks at it in the way of, well, in order to get him more practice time, he needed to not play on Sunday afternoon. Sure, whatever you want to say, but at the end of the day, it goes down in the book as a healthy scratch. And whether you're trying to save his mentality or not, it's a healthy scratch, and it's what should have happened.
Yeah, barring injury, I bet they at least carry three goalies through this Western trip.
Well, yeah. Now that you're already on the trip, you're not going to really change personnel.
Yeah, and that's perfectly fine. See how it goes from there. See if maybe you give Jarry a shot against checks notes. Yikes. But I mean, maybe all three goalies play the trip just because you have that. If it's like I said, if everyone stays healthy and you have those options at your disposal, why not? I mean, Nedeljkovic already got one in. Maybe I don't know. There's no slouches in this. I mean, because all of a sudden Calgary's a good team. There's no slouches on this trip anymore. I would have said maybe you give Jarry the low ball here in Calgary, but yikes, they're, I believe, still undefeated. I'm not totally sure.
The only undefeated team was Winnipeg, I thought.
They're 4-0-1, so they're without a regulation loss. They're one of three teams without a regulation loss. So have at it. So maybe you just try and figure it out. Maybe you give Jarry a tough one. Just say, here's a tough matchup. Do what you got to do. And it's just getting to that point of, man, the Penguins just need someone to wake up and steal the net. And Nedeljkovic has a hand on it, and so does Blomqvist, just by way of having all that ice time.
Mm-hmm.
It's Jarry's turn to come in and perform as the starter that he's supposed to, and steal the show like he did when he got here.
Yeah. How much of this do you think is, like, could you see this scenario playing out? Blomqvist and Ned kind of bounce back and forth for the next 3 games to close out the road trip. They try to get Jarry right in practices and extra sessions after, and then Jarry plays that October 29th game against the Wild when they return home.
I could see that one, yeah. I don't know if the fan base would like it.
Well, no, the fan base doesn't want to watch this guy anymore.
No, and I mean, there was a loud pop whenever they announced Blomqvist as the starter at the arena the other night. So it'll be tough. I think the issue with putting Jarry out on home ice is the obvious short leash. And man, Pittsburgh fans are anxious. They're antsy. They won't be afraid to Bronx cheer him. They won't be afraid to boo him. They won't be afraid to cheer when he gets taken out.
Well, here's the thing, though. You're professional athletes. That's part of the gig. Like,
You're right.
These guys are human. I understand that. But, like, if you can't handle that, then I don't know if you can handle being in this league, in which case put him on waivers, bury him, deal with the $4 million, whatever. Like, at that point, he's unplayable. If he can't deal with that minuscule little detail of, hey, people are going to boo you, yeah, you should probably be in the AHL. Although maybe Wilkes-Barre Scranton fans will boo him as well up at Mohegan Sun.
The thing with that, you're right. Professional athletes should be able to handle that. However, this is it sounds like it's a mental thing we're dealing with from all the quotes and the things that are getting said.
Well, the way he's playing, yeah, it almost feels like it too.
It's yes. So if Penguins fans were smarter, I was going to assume they are, they would cheer him on and try and give him a thunderous round of applause whenever his name gets announced. They would try that. They should be showing that there is support for him from the fan base, because there clearly hasn't been recently. And by recently, I mean the last few years. But maybe that one little mental push of there's still a fan base here for you. Maybe you give him that first game back against Minnesota, and as long as the fan base can respond appropriately, that could go well. However, yikes.
There's no good answer to this, because there's been no good situation that the Penguins have been put in, because Jarry has not been, I mean, there's bad, and then there's 12 goals in 1.1 game or 2.1 games. When did he get taken out? 4 shots into the last game that he played against Buffalo. So, I mean, you're at a level right now where there is no good option. There's no good resolution to this for Tristan Jarry unless he starts to perform better. And again, when does he get that opportunity? It's a little bit harder when there's 2 other goaltenders that deserve opportunities in front of you.
Yeah. And Penguins fans have not been quiet when it comes to voicing their opinions.
They shouldn't be.
And the last couple of years, they essentially got, and the Pittsburgh fans for that matter, they essentially got Hextall fired. They essentially got Matt Canada fired. Both of those chants happened at PPG Paints Arena as well. So,
yeah.
If Penguins fans try and voice their opinion against Jarry, things could get ugly.
Well, not like they aren't already. So I say voice it. Whatever you think, say it. I mean, obviously it's a family environment, so keep it within reason. But if you want to boo, I don't like booing home team players, but when it gets to a level that we've seen from Tristan Jarry, I mean, I'm not going to say I would, but I would understand if some people feel some type of way if he ends up starting against the Minnesota Wild in a game that a lot of fans are looking forward to, because it could potentially be the last time that Marc-Andre Fleury steps foot on ice in Pittsburgh as a professional hockey player. But, again, no great answers. We laid out all the options that Kyle Dubas has, and none of them are particularly enticing. So let us know in the comment section. What would you do? Would you keep the 3 goaltender system rolling and try to figure it out that way? Would you try to trade him? Obviously, that's probably the best option, but do you think that there's any opportunity to trade him at this point? Or would you just put him on waivers and eat that $4+ million as a cap penalty to have him playing in the minor leagues? We'll see what the Penguins end up doing. A decision has to be made at some point. I just don't think it's going to be made, as you mentioned, over the next 3 games while they're still out there in Western Canada. But that's going to do it for this episode of the Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Thank you guys so much for tuning into this one. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Tip of the Ice-Burgh. Make sure you like, make sure you subscribe, tell all your friends, or you can catch us anywhere you get your podcast from. We'll see you guys next time.